The plane hummed 30,000 feet above the Midwest, a red-eye from Chicago to Los Angeles, when Karen Brooks, a smug flight attendant, loomed over Naomi Carter. "Ma'am, you're in the wrong seat. Move to coach," she barked at the poised black woman in first class. Naomi complied silently, dignity intact, as whispers spread. 4 minutes later, turbulence jolted the cabin, and Karen's smirk faded fast. She'd just crossed the wife of the airline's owner. What chaos would this spark? Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. If you stand for justice, hit like, subscribe, and join us for more gripping tales of resilience. Naomi Carter moved through the bustling Chicago airport terminal with the kind of quiet fury that could ignite a storm. Her navy suit hugged her frame, sharp and tailored, a testament to years spent clawing her way up as a civil rights attorney. The late evening crowd buzzed around her, a chaotic blend of rolling suitcases, rushed goodbyes, and the sharp scent of coffee from overpriced kiosks. She didn't rush or shove. Her strides were deliberate, her chin tilted just enough to signal she belonged anywhere she damn well pleased. A few travelers nodded at her warm smile, but most barely noticed, their eyes skimming over her like she was just another face in the herd. She liked it that way. It let her observe, calculate, and strike when the moment called for it. Tonight, though she wasn't hunting for a fight, she was heading to Los Angeles for a rare weekend with her husband, Marcus Reed, a man whose name carried weight she rarely flaunted. Her first-class ticket, earned through grit and a hefty caseload, felt like a small victory in a world that often tried to shove her aside. The boarding process kicked off with the usual monotony, gate agents barking seat numbers over a crackling intercom while passengers shuffled into line. Naomi handed her ticket to a young agent with a buzz cut and a tired grin. He scanned it, his eyes flicking up to meet hers. "Enjoy your flight, ma'am," he said, voice clipped but polite. She gave a nod, her heels clicking softly against the jet bridge's metal floor as she approached the aircraft. The hum of engines vibrated through her soles, a steady pulse that matched her heartbeat. 2 flight attendants stood at the door, one a wiry guy with a forced smile, the other a woman whose pinched expression suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. Naomi brushed past their half-hearted greetings and stepped into the plane, the cabin air cool and stale against her skin. She made her way to first class, her assigned seat a plush window spot in row 3. She slid her leather carry-on into the overhead bin with practiced ease, the faint creak of the latch snapping shut as she settled in. Her fingers brushed the armrest, and she let out a slow breath, glancing around at the handful of passengers already seated, a mix of suits and smug entitlement. The cabin filled up fast. A guy in a pinstripe blazer plopped into the aisle seat across from her, his cologne sharp enough to sting. A woman with a designer scarf fussed with her purse 2 rows up. Then he walked in, a tall figure in a charcoal suit, moving with the kind of purpose that made people look twice. Marcus wasn't on this flight. She knew that. His schedule kept him pinned to boardrooms and private jets. But this man had that same air, a quiet command that didn't need words. He glanced her way as he passed, his face a blank slate, and took a seat in the front row. Their eyes locked for half a second, a flicker of something unreadable passing between them before he turned away. She shrugged it off, her attention drifting to the window where runway lights blinked in the dusk. The plane was nearly full when Karen Brooks stormed into the picture. She was a veteran flight attendant, late 40s, with a clipboard clutched like a weapon, and a face that said she'd seen it all, and hated most of it. Her blonde hair was pulled into a tight bun, strands fraying at the edges, and her uniform hung stiffly on her frame. She moved through the aisle with clipped steps, her eyes darting over passengers like a hawk sizing up prey. When those eyes landed on Naomi, they narrowed, a faint crease forming between her brows. Karen stopped dead, her lips pursing as she flipped through her seating chart, the rustle of paper loud in the otherwise quiet cabin. She looked at Naomi again, then back at the chart, her head tilting as if something didn't add up. Naomi caught the shift, her gut tightening, but she kept her face neutral. Years of courtroom battles had taught her how to mask the fire simmering inside. Karen approached, her heels thudding against the carpeted floor, and leaned in close enough for Naomi to smell the mint gum she was chewing. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her voice polite but edged with a blade. I think there's a mix-up with your seat. Can I see your boarding pass? Naomi met her gaze, calm but unyielding, and reached into her jacket pocket. She pulled out the pass, crisp and printed, and handed it over without a word. Karen snatched it, her fingers brushing Naomi's with a twitch of irritation. She scanned the ticket, her frown deepening, then flicked her eyes back to Naomi. "It seems there's been a mistake," she said, lowering her voice like she was doing Naomi a favor. "This seat's reserved. I'll need to move you to another one." Naomi blinked, her lips curving into a polite but firm smile. "There's no mistake," she replied, her tone even, every syllable weighted. "This is my seat." Karen hesitated, her gaze bouncing between Naomi and the chart, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. Then her mask snapped back into place, and she tilted her head, her smile tightening. "Perhaps you meant to book a seat in the main cabin," she said, her voice softening into something patronizing, the words sharp enough to slice through the air. Naomi's smile didn't budge, but her eyes hardened, a glint of steel flashing in their depths. "No," she said, still calm, still steady. "This is the seat I booked." The cabin stirred, a low hum of murmurs rippling through the rows. The guy in the pinstripe suit shifted, his head turning slightly. The woman with the scarf glanced over her shoulder, her lips parting in curiosity. Karen's cheeks flushed, a faint pink creeping up her neck, but she pressed on, her professionalism teetering on the edge of something uglier. She gestured toward the back of the plane, her hand slicing through the air. "I can get you a seat closer to the rear. It'll be just as comfortable." Naomi's composure didn't crack. She leaned back in her seat, crossing one leg over the other, her posture a quiet defiance. "I'd prefer to stay here," she said, her voice smooth but laced with an undertone that could cut glass. The tension thickened, a heavy fog settling over first class. Karen's flush deepened, her jaw tightening as she leaned closer, her clipboard digging into her hip. "I'm afraid I have to insist, ma'am," she said through a tight-lipped smile, her words clipped and final. "Please gather your belongings." Naomi held her stare for a long moment, her pulse steady despite the heat rising in her chest. She glanced around, catching the averted gazes of passengers pretending not to watch, then let out a soft sigh. Without a word, she stood, her movements slow and deliberate, a queen rising from a throne she'd been forced to abandon. She reached into the overhead bin, pulled down her carry-on, and stepped into the aisle. The whispers followed her like a shadow as she walked toward Coach, her head high, her spine straight. Karen's eyes burned into her back, a mix of triumph and unease flickering in them. Naomi didn't look at her, didn't give her the satisfaction. She passed the man in the charcoal suit, his gaze tracking her with that same unreadable intensity, but he stayed silent, his hands resting calmly on his knees. The coach section was a mess of cramped seats and restless bodies, the air thick with the smell of sweat and cheap perfume. Naomi found an empty spot near the back, a middle seat wedged between a snoring guy in a hoodie and a kid kicking the row ahead. She slid in, her bag tucked under the seat, and pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved fast, tapping out a message. To Marcus. "They moved me. Handle it." She hit send, her lips pressing into a thin line. Karen might think she'd won this round, but Naomi knew better. This was just the opening shot in a war the flight attendant couldn't imagine. The engines roared as the plane taxied, and Naomi settled in, her mind already racing ahead to the chaos she'd unleash. The plane sliced through the night sky 30 minutes after takeoff, 30,000 feet above the endless sprawl of the Midwest. Naomi Carter sat crammed in her new coach seat, her navy suit wrinkled against the fraying fabric of the armrest. To her left, a guy in a faded hoodie snored, his head lolling onto her shoulder with every breath, a faint whiff of stale beer drifting from his open mouth. To her right, a kid no older than 10 kicked the seat in front, his sneakers thumping, a relentless beat that matched the pounding in Naomi's temples. She shifted, her knees jamming into the tray table, and stared at the phone in her lap. Marcus hadn't replied yet, but she knew he'd seen her text. His silence meant he was already moving pieces on a chessboard Karen Brooks couldn't even see. Naomi's lips twitched, not quite a smile, her mind spinning with the kind of plans that had won her courtroom battles against giants. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The cabin hummed with restless energy, passengers rustling bags, flipping through magazines, or tapping screens with bleary eyes. The overhead lights flickered, casting jagged shadows across the rows. Naomi leaned back, her gaze drifting to the window where clouds churned in the dark, thick and restless. She'd flown enough to know the signs, that subtle shift in the air that promised trouble. Her fingers tightened around her phone, the cool metal grounding her as she replayed Karen's smug sneer in her head. "See? This is why we have rules," she'd said later, but that came after the chaos hit. For now, Naomi waited, her patience a coiled spring ready to snap. What kind of storm was brewing out there? And how could she turn it into her weapon? It started with a jolt, a sharp lurch that sent the plane dipping like a roller coaster cresting its peak. Gasps erupted, heads jerked up, and the kid beside Naomi froze mid-kick, his eyes wide. Drinks toppled in first class, a splash of soda, soaking the pinstripe suit guy's lap as he cursed loudly. The intercom crackled, the captain's voice cutting through. "Folks, we've hit some rough air. Please stay seated and buckle up." The plane shuddered again, harder this time, a violent shake that rattled the overhead bins. A woman 3 rows up shrieked, clutching her armrests, while the snoring guy jolted awake, blinking in confusion. Naomi clicked her seatbelt into place, her movements calm, deliberate, her pulse steady despite the chaos blooming around her. Was this just nature's tantrum, or fate handing her an opening? Karen Brooks burst into view, her clipboard gone, her bun unraveling as she stormed down the aisle. Her face was flushed, a sheen of sweat glinting on her forehead, but her eyes burned with that same self-righteous fire. She gripped the seatbacks for balance as the plane bucked, her voice rising over the din. "Everyone, stay calm! Keep your belts on!" she barked, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. She scanned the cabin, her gaze landing on the coach section, like a predator spotting a wounded animal. "This is what happens when people don't follow protocol," she muttered, loud enough for half the plane to hear. A few passengers nodded, others frowned, but Naomi caught the jab, her jaw tightening. Karen's eyes locked onto her, a smirk tugging at her lips as she steadied herself against a seat. "See? This is why we have rules," she said, her voice, dripping with venom, aimed straight at Naomi. Was she really blaming her for this? Or was this just the excuse she'd been itching to use? The accusation hung in the air, heavy and sour, and the cabin's murmurs shifted into something sharper. A guy in a baseball cap 2 rows ahead twisted around, his brow furrowed. "Hey lady, she didn't do anything," he snapped, his voice rough but firm. Karen's head whipped toward him, her smirk faltering. "Mind your business," she shot back, her fingers digging into the seat fabric as the plane jolted again. The guy didn't back down, his face reddening. "You moved her for no reason and now you're blaming her for turbulence? That's bullshit." The kid beside Naomi giggled, a nervous sound, while the woman up front clutched her scarf tighter, her lips pursed. Karen straightened, her chest heaving as she pointed at the guy. "You want to cause more trouble? Sit down." The shouting match flared, voices overlapping, a chaotic symphony of anger and confusion. How far would Karen push? This before she realized she'd lit a fuse? The plane rocked harder, a deep groan echoing through the fuselage as if it were protesting the mess below. Overhead bins popped open, spilling a backpack into the aisle with a thud. Passengers yelped, some fumbling with belts, others craning, to see the drama unfold. Naomi stayed still, her eyes tracking Karen as the flight attendant stomped back toward first class, her heels slamming the floor with every step. The guy in the cap muttered something under his breath, slumping back, in his seat, but his glare followed her. Naomi's fingers brushed her phone again, her mind racing. She could use this. The chaos, the witnesses, the raw edge of Karen's bias laid bare for all to see. But how much worse could it get before she struck back? Karen reached the front, her silhouette framed against the galley curtain, and for a moment she looked triumphant, like she'd tamed the beast of a restless cabin. The turbulence eased, a brief lull that let the passengers catch their breath. Naomi exhaled, her shoulders loosening, but her grip on the phone tightened. She knew better than to trust a calm like this. It was the eye of a hurricane, not the end. The intercom buzzed again, the captain's voice graver now. "Folks, we're experiencing some mechanical issues tied to this weather. We're making an emergency landing in Kansas. Hang tight." Groans rippled through the rows, the kid beside Naomi whining, "Aw man, I just want to get home." Karen's head snapped up, her smugness replaced by a flicker of panic, but she masked it fast, barking orders at her wiry colleague. What did she think now, knowing her little power play had crashed into something bigger? Naomi's lips curved, a faint, dangerous smile. "Mechanical issues, huh?" Marcus had pull, more than Karen could dream of. And that emergency landing wasn't just a fluke. She'd texted him 30 minutes ago, and he'd moved fast, likely leaning on his contacts to ground this plane and dig into what happened. Karen had no idea the storm she'd stirred wasn't just in the sky. It was heading straight for her career, her life, her everything. Naomi leaned back, the snoring guy's head flopping onto her shoulder again. But she didn't shove him off this time. She was plotting, her mind a blade sharpening with every passing second. The plane tilted, descending toward Kansas, and the cabin braced for impact, literal and otherwise. Hey, viewers, what do you think? Comment number 1 if you're raging at Karen's nerve blaming Naomi for this mess. Number 2 if you're rooting for that guy who called her out. Hit that like button if you're ready to see justice roll in, and subscribe to catch how Naomi flips this chaos into payback. So, what's next for Naomi? Pinned in coach with a plane full of witnesses and a flight attendant who's digging her own grave. Will this emergency landing be her chance to strike, or is Karen about to twist the knife even deeper? Stick around, because this turbulence is just the start of a wild ride. The small Kansas airport buzzed with the jagged edge of chaos as the plane screeched to a halt on the tarmac, its engines winding down into a low, guttural hum. Passengers spilled out of the jet bridge, their faces a mix of exhaustion and irritation, dragging carry-ons and muttering about missed connections. The night air hit Naomi Carter like a slap, cool and sharp, carrying the faint tang of jet fuel and damp asphalt. Her navy suit was creased now, her heels clicking unevenly on the cracked terminal floor as she slipped away from the crowd. She found a quiet corner near a flickering vending machine, its buzz filling the silence as she pulled out her phone. Marcus picked up on the first ring, his voice a deep rumble through the static. "I'm on my way," he said. No preamble, no questions. Just the steel of a man who'd built an empire and knew how to wield it. "Private jets landing in 20. What happened?" Naomi's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes scanning the terminal for Karen Brooks. "She moved me, Marcus. First class to coach, no reason but the obvious. I texted you, now we're grounded. You did this, didn't you?" A low chuckle came through the line, dark and promising. "Damn right. Stay put. I'll handle the rest." The terminal was a squat, ugly building, all peeling paint and fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying flies. Passengers milled around, some slumped in plastic chairs, others queued at a lone coffee cart manned by a bored teenager. Naomi leaned against the wall, her carry-on at her feet, her mind racing. She'd seen Karen's type before. Petty tyrants, who thrived on control, who looked at her brown skin and saw a target instead of a person. But this wasn't just about a seat anymore. It was a gauntlet thrown down, and Naomi wasn't one to back off. She watched the crowd, picking out familiar faces from the flight, the guy in the pinstripe suit nursing a stained lap, the scarf lady clutching her purse like a lifeline. Then Karen emerged, striding out of the jet bridge with her head high, her bun tighter now, her uniform crisp despite the chaos. She barked orders at her wiry colleague, her voice cutting through the murmurs, a queen reclaiming her court. Naomi's stomach twisted, not with fear, but with the cold burn of resolve. Karen's eyes swept the terminal, landing on Naomi with a jolt. Her lips curled, a smirk that said she thought she'd won, and she made a beeline for her, heels pounding. The linoleum. Naomi straightened, her posture a wall of defiance as Karen closed the distance. "You caused this mess," Karen hissed, stopping a foot away, her breath hot with mint and malice. "Hope you're happy, getting us all stuck here." Her voice was low, meant to sting, but loud enough for a few nearby passengers to turn. The guy in the baseball cap from the plane lingered by the coffee cart, his head tilting as he caught the exchange. Naomi's gaze didn't waver, her voice steady as granite. I didn't cause anything. You moved me for no reason, and now you're scrambling. Maybe you should check your own mistakes. Karen's smirk faltered, her flush creeping back, but she leaned closer, her finger jabbing the air. Don't play smart with me. You think you're special? You're lucky I didn't have you kicked off. Naomi's eyes narrowed, a spark igniting behind them. She stepped forward, closing the gap, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Lucky? No, Karen. You're the one who's out of luck. My husband owns this airline. You're done. The words landed like a punch and Karen's face froze, her mouth parting in a silent gasp. Then she laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that echoed off the walls. Your husband owns this? Please, you're delusional. She shook her head, turning, away as if Naomi were a child spinning tales, but her hands trembled slightly, clutching her clipboard like a shield. Naomi didn't flinch, her stare boring into Karen's back as the flight attendant retreated toward a cluster of crew members. She'd planted the seed, now she'd let it grow. The terminal's glass doors slid open, and a gust of wind ushered in Marcus Reed. He was a broad-shouldered man in his early 40s, his charcoal suit impeccable, his presence a thunderclap in the cramped space. His dark eyes found Naomi instantly, a flicker of relief softening the hard lines of his face before they hardened again. He strode through the crowd, passengers parting like water, their whispers trailing him. That's Marcus Reed, someone muttered, a woman with a stroller, gaping as he passed. The CEO? Another voice chimed in, disbelief thick. Karen turned at the sound, her smugness draining as she spotted him. Marcus didn't slow, his focus locked on Naomi until he reached her side. You okay? He asked, his hand brushing. Her arm warm and steady. She nodded, her lips curving faintly. Better now. He turned, his gaze sweeping the terminal until it landed on Karen, who'd gone pale, her clipboard slipping in her grip. Marcus closed the distance in 3 strides, his voice a low growl that carried weight. You're Karen Brooks? She nodded, her throat bobbing as she swallowed hard. Yes, sir, she managed, her tone shaky, the bravado gone. You moved my wife from her seat, he said. Not a question, a fact laid bare. First class, her ticket, her right. You've got no excuse for that. Karen's mouth opened, then closed, her eyes darting for an escape that wasn't there. It was a mix-up, sir, I didn't know, she stammered, but Marcus cut her off, his hand slicing the air. You didn't ask, you assumed. That's your mistake. He paused, letting the silence crush her, then added, You're suspended. Effective now. Pack your things. You're off this crew. The terminal went still. A collective breath held as Karen's face crumpled, shock giving way to a flicker of rage. Suspended? She sputtered, her voice rising. For doing my job? Marcus didn't blink, his stare cold as steel. For doing it wrong. He turned back to Naomi, dismissing Karen like she was dust on his sleeve, and she stood there, trembling, her world unraveling. Naomi exhaled, a weight lifting off her chest, her mind already tasting victory. She'd won this round, Karen was out, and the passengers whispering around them were witnesses to her triumph. She slipped her hand into Marcus's, ready to leave this dump behind. But then the doors slid open again, and a new figure stormed in, his boots thudding against the floor. He was a barrel-chested man in his 50s, a sheriff's badge glinting on his chest, his face a mirror of Karen's sharp features softened by years and whiskey. Tom Brooks stopped short, his eyes locking onto his sister, then flicking to Naomi and Marcus with a scowl. What the hell's going on here? He demanded, his voice a gravelly boom that silenced the terminal. Karen rushed to him, her composure cracking as she pointed at Naomi. Her! She got me suspended, Tom, over nothing. Tom's gaze shifted, hardening as it settled on Naomi, a predator sizing up prey. Is that so? He said, his hand resting on his holster, casual but deliberate. Marcus stepped forward, his frame a wall between Tom and Naomi. But the sheriff smirked, unfazed. This is my town, pal. I'll fix this. Naomi's pulse spiked, her victory souring as Tom's deputies fanned out behind him, their hands hovering near their guns. The passengers shrank back, the air thickening with a new kind of threat. Karen's eyes gleamed, a lifeline found in her brother's shadow, and Naomi realized this wasn't over, it was escalating. Marcus squeezed her hand, his jaw tight, but she could feel the storm brewing. Tom wasn't just here to complain, he was here to fight, and he'd brought muscle. The taste of triumph faded, replaced by the bitter sting of a battle she hadn't seen coming. The Kansas airport parking lot stretched out under a moonless sky, a sea of cracked asphalt dotted with rusting sedans and flickering streetlights. Naomi Carter and Marcus Reed moved fast, their breaths puffing in the chilly night air as they headed for their rental car, a sleek black SUV parked near the terminal's edge. Naomi's heels scraped the ground, her navy suit now rumpled, her carry-on slung over her shoulder like a soldier's pack. Marcus kept pace beside her, his charcoal suit still pristine, his broad frame a shield against the unease creeping up her spine. The terminal's glass doors loomed behind them, spitting out the last stragglers from the flight, their voices fading into the wind. Naomi's mind churned. Karen Brooks was down, suspended, humiliated, but that sheriff, Tom Brooks, his swagger, and that glinting badge, he'd turned her victory into something fragile, something that could shatter with one wrong move. They were 10 feet from the SUV when headlights flared, twin beams slicing through the dark as a sheriff's cruiser screeched to a stop, blocking their path. Dust kicked up, swirling around their ankles, and Tom Brooks stepped out, his boots crunching gravel, his deputies flanking him like hounds on a leash. He was a hulking figure, his gut straining against his khaki uniform, his face a slab of weathered stone under a wide-brimmed hat. His hand rested on his holster, fingers twitching, and his eyes locked onto Naomi with a cold, predatory gleam. "Going somewhere?" he drawled, his voice thick with menace, a slow burn that promised trouble. Marcus stopped short, his arm brushing Naomi's, his jaw tightening as he squared up. "We're leaving," he said, his tone clipped, authoritative, the CEO used to bending the world to his will. Tom smirked, stepping closer, his shadow swallowing the light. "Not so fast, pal. We've got a problem." Naomi's pulse quickened, her fingers tightening on her bag as she caught the glint of steel in Tom's hand, not drawn yet, but ready. The deputies, two wiry men with buzz cuts and sneers, spread out, cutting off any retreat. Passengers lingered near the terminal doors, their phones up, filming the standoff, a handful of blurry lights piercing the night. Tom tilted his head toward Naomi, his smirk widening. "You're under arrest," he said, his words landing like a hammer. "Disturbing the peace, causing a scene on that plane. My sister says you're trouble, and I believe her." Marcus stepped forward, his voice rising, a growl cutting through the tension. "That's a lie. She didn't do anything. Your sister's the one who started this." Tom's eyes flicked to him, unimpressed, and he shrugged, casual as if swatting. "A fly. Her word against yours, and this is my turf." Before Marcus could argue, Tom lunged, his meaty hand grabbing Naomi's wrist and yanking her forward. She stumbled, her heel catching a crack, but she didn't fall, her free hand swinging, her bag into his gut. He grunted, his grip loosening for a split second, but then he twisted her arm, snapping cuffs around her wrist with a metallic clack. Pain shot up her elbow, sharp and hot, and she bit back a gasp, her eyes blazing as she glared at him. Marcus surged forward, shoving Tom's shoulder, his fists clenched. "Get your hands off her!" he roared, but a deputy tackled him, pinning his arms as the second one drew a baton, its tip hovering near his ribs. The crowd gasped, phones shaking. In their hands, a woman's voice crying out, "They're arresting her for nothing." Naomi's chest heaved, her mind racing. This wasn't just retaliation, it was a power play, raw and racist, Tom's way of saying she didn't belong, not in first class, not anywhere. Tom dragged her toward the cruiser, his fingers digging into her arm, leaving bruises she could already feel blooming. "You think you're some big shot's wife?" he muttered, his breath sour with tobacco as he leaned close. "I don't care who he is, you're nothing here." Naomi's voice came low, lethal, cutting through the pain. "You'll regret this, Sheriff. You have no idea what's coming." He chuckled, shoving her against the car door, her cheek pressing into the cold metal. "Keep talking, sweetheart. It'll make the cell more fun." Marcus wrestled against the deputy, his suit tearing at the sleeve, his eyes wild as he shouted, "Let her go! I'll have your badge for this!" Tom ignored him, slamming the cruiser door as Naomi slid inside, her hands cuffed behind her, her bag confiscated. The terminal crowd grew, their murmurs swelling into a low roar, the guy in the baseball cap pushing forward yelling, "This is bullshit, let her go!" A woman with a stroller joined in, her voice trembling. "She didn't do anything. I saw it all." Tom spun, his face darkening, and barked at his deputies, "Clear them out now." The wiry men advanced, batons raised, and the crowd scattered, phones still rolling, capturing every second. Naomi watched through the cruiser's grimy window, her heart pounding, her mind a storm of fury and strategy. Marcus broke free, shoving the deputy off, and ran to the car, pounding the glass. "Naomi, I'm calling the lawyers, hang on," he shouted, his voice muffled but fierce. She nodded, her lips pressed tight, her eyes locked on his, a silent promise passing between them. Tom climbed into the driver's seat, the cruiser lurching as he peeled out, tires squealing against the asphalt. Naomi's head bumped the window, her cuffs biting into her wrists, but she stayed silent, her gaze fixed on the shrinking figure of Marcus sprinting back to the terminal. The radio crackled, a deputy's voice cutting in. "Sheriff, we've got her bag. What do you want done?" Tom grinned, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Hold it, we'll deal with it later." Naomi's stomach twisted. Her phone was in there, her lifeline to Marcus, her evidence from the flight. She leaned back, forcing her breathing to steady, her mind racing for an escape. Tom thought he'd won, thought he could bury her in his little Kansas fiefdom, but he didn't know her, didn't know the fire she carried. The cruiser rolled through the empty lot, the airport fading into a blur of lights as Tom hummed a tuneless song, his fingers tapping the wheel. Naomi's eyes narrowed, catching a flicker of movement outside, a second cruiser pulling up alongside, its driver nodding at Tom. She recognized the setup, the kind of small-town muscle that thrived on intimidation, the kind she'd faced down, in courtrooms and won. But this wasn't a courtroom. This was raw power, unchecked and ugly, and it was aimed straight at her. Tom's radio buzzed again, Karen's voice breaking through, shrill and triumphant. "Tom, I've got witnesses. They'll say she shoved me on the plane, lost her temper. Pin it on her." Naomi's blood ran cold, her jaw clenching as the lie sank in. Karen wasn't just licking her wounds, she was rewriting the story, framing Naomi for violence she'd never committed. The cruiser slowed, pulling into a side lot near a chain-link fence, the airport now a distant glow. Tom twisted in his seat, his grin wide and cruel. "See? My sister's got a good head on her. You're not just some loudmouth now, you're a criminal. Assaulting crew, causing a scene, it's all on you." Naomi met his stare, her voice steady despite the ache in her arms. "You're lying, and you know it. There's video. Passengers saw everything." Tom's grin faltered, but he shrugged, unconcerned. "Video can disappear, sweetheart. This is my town, my rules." He stepped out, slamming the door, and barked at the second cruiser's driver. "Keep an eye on her. I'll be back." Naomi sat alone in the dimness, the cuffs cutting deeper with every shift, her mind a whirlwind of plans and rage. Marcus was out there, lawyers on the way, but Tom and Karen were moving fast, stacking the deck with lies and muscle. The deputy outside paced, his silhouette a hulking shape against the fence, his radio crackling with updates she couldn't hear. She flexed her fingers, testing the cuffs, her eyes darting for anything she could use. This wasn't just about a seat anymore, it was a war, and Tom had just drawn first blood. But Naomi wasn't done, not even close. She'd fight from this cage if she had to, and she'd make them all pay. The Kansas jail cell stank of mildew and rust, its concrete walls slick with dampness that seeped into Naomi Carter's bones. She sat on a metal bench bolted to the floor, her navy suit smeared with dirt from the cruiser's back seat, her wrists raw where the cuffs had bitten deep. The air was thick, heavy with the sour tang of sweat and despair, and a single bulb buzzed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow across the graffiti-scratched walls. Her carry-on was gone, confiscated by Tom Brooks and his goons, but she'd managed to slip her phone into her bra before they'd searched her, a desperate move born of instinct. its edges pressed against her skin now, a lifeline she couldn't use yet. Not with the deputy pacing outside the bars, his boots scuffing the linoleum with every step. Naomi kept her back straight, her eyes fixed on a crack in the wall, her mind a furnace of fury and calculation. She'd been here an hour, maybe two, time blurred in this hole, but she knew Marcus was out there, tearing the world apart to get her free. The cell door clanged open, and Tom Brooks swaggered in, Karen Brooks trailing behind him like a vulture circling a kill. Tom's khaki uniform was wrinkled now, his hat pushed back to reveal a sheen of sweat on his brow, but his smirk was as sharp as ever. Karen's flight attendant uniform hung loose, her bun fraying into a mess of blonde strands, her eyes glinting with a mix of spite and glee. She clutched a stack of papers, witness statements, Naomi guessed, and her lips curled as she stopped a foot from the bars. "Should have stayed in your place," Karen said, her voice a venomous hiss that echoed off the concrete. "You thought you could waltz in and ruin me? Look where that got you." Tom chuckled, leaning against the wall, his arms crossed, his badge catching the light. "She's right, you know," he added, his tone casual but laced with threat. "Big shot lawyer, huh? Not so big now." Naomi's gaze flicked between them, steady, unyielding, her silence a weapon sharper than their taunts. Karen stepped closer, her fingers tightening on the papers until they crinkled. "I've got passengers who'll swear you lost it on that plane, shoved me, screamed, the works. You're done, and your fancy husband can't save you." Naomi's chest tightened, her breath catching as the lie sank in, but she didn't flinch. She shifted, the phone's edge digging into her ribs, and tilted her head, her voice low and cutting. "You're lying, Karen. Video doesn't lie, and I've got it." Tom's smirk faltered, his eyes narrowing, but Karen laughed, a brittle sound that bounced around the cell. "Video? Good luck with that, it's long gone by now." Naomi's fingers twitched, itching to pull the phone and prove her wrong, but she held back, her mind racing. She'd recorded them on the plane, a habit from years of facing liars in court, and now she'd use it. But not yet. Not here. Tom pushed off the wall, his boots thudding closer, and leaned down until his face was level with hers, his breath hot with tobacco and rage. "You think you're smart, huh? Recording us. Even if you did, it's my jail, my rules. That phone's not saving you." Naomi met his stare, her pulse pounding but her voice steady as steel. "You're scared, Sheriff, you should be." His hand shot out, slamming the bars, the clang reverberating through the cell, but she didn't blink, didn't move. Karen smirked, tossing the papers onto the bench beside Naomi, their edges curling in the damp air. "Keep dreaming," she said, turning to leave. "This is just the start." Tom lingered, his eyes boring into her, then followed his sister out, the door slamming shut with a finality that rattled Naomi's bones. She waited, counting the deputy's steps as he paced. 1, 2, 3. Then a pause as he muttered into his radio. Her fingers slipped under her jacket, brushing the phone, and she pulled it out, her movements slow, silent. The screen glowed faintly, battery at 10%, but it was enough. She opened the recording app, her thumb hovering over the start button, and pressed it just as the door clanged again. Tom stormed back in alone, his face a mask of fury, his fists clenched. "Your husband's making noise out there," he snarled, stopping short of the bars. "Lawyers, feds, the works. Too bad they won't find you in time." Naomi kept the phone hidden, angled against her lap, capturing every word as he ranted. "You're a nobody here, just another troublemaker who thought she could play big. I'll bury you and him too." Her heart raced, the recording a ticking bomb in her hands, but she stayed calm, her eyes locked on his. "You're burying yourself, Tom," she said, her voice a quiet blade. "Keep talking. It's all on tape." His face twisted, a flash of doubt crossing it, but he laughed, harsh and guttural. "Tape? You've got nothing." He turned to leave, his boots echoing, and Naomi stopped the recording, slipping the phone back into her bra as the deputy resumed his pacing. She'd caught him, his threats, his arrogance. It was gold, but she needed out to use it. The cell felt smaller now, the walls closing in, her breath shallow as she waited for Marcus. Minutes stretched into an eternity, the bulb flickering, plunging the cell into brief shadows. Then the outer door burst open, and Marcus stormed in. His charcoal suit rumpled, his eyes blazing with a fury that could level mountains. Behind him trailed two lawyers in crisp suits, their briefcases swinging, and a federal agent in a windbreaker, his badge glinting. Tom followed, his swagger gone, his face pale as he barked at the deputy. "Open the damn cell!" The wiry man fumbled with the keys, the lock clicking, and Naomi stood, her legs stiff but her head high. Marcus reached her first, his hands cupping her face, his voice rough. "You're out, I've got you." She nodded, leaning into him, the cuffs falling away as the deputy unlocked them, her wrists red and throbbing. They moved fast, the lawyers flanking her, the agent barking orders at Tom, who sputtered. "This is my jurisdiction," Marcus shot back. "Not anymore." His arm around Naomi as they headed for the door. Freedom hit her like a wave, the cool air outside the jail washing over her, the stars sharp against the black sky. She thought she'd won, Karen's lies exposed, Tom's threats recorded, Marcus's power pulling her from the brink. But as they reached the parking lot, a state trooper's cruiser rolled up, its lights flashing, its driver stepping out with a grin that chilled her blood. Jack Vance, a hulking figure with a scarred face and a badge pinned to his chest, nodded at Tom, who smirked back. "Found drugs in her bag," Jack said, holding up Naomi's carry-on, a baggie of white powder glinting in his hand. "She's not going anywhere." Naomi's stomach dropped, her victory crumbling as Marcus roared, "That's planted, you bastard!" The lawyers scrambled, shouting about evidence, but Jack advanced, his gun drawn, his voice a growl. "Hands up, both of you." Sirens wailed in the distance, closing in, and Naomi realized Tom had played his ace, a dirty cop buddy with a vendetta, turning her freedom into a trap. She raised her hands, her eyes locked on Marcus, her mind racing for a way out as the trooper closed in, the night exploding into chaos once more. Hey viewers, what do you say? Comment number 1 if you're furious at Tom and Karen's filthy lies. Number 2, if you think Naomi's recording will save her. Smash that like button if you're rooting for her to outsmart these crooks. And subscribe to see justice hit hard. So, with Naomi cuffed again and drugs planted, what's her next move? Can she turn Jack's frame up into her escape, or will this twisted conspiracy drag her deeper into the abyss? Stay tuned, because this fight's about to get uglier. The Kansas highway stretched out like a ribbon of black tar under a bruised dawn sky, its edges fraying into gravel and weeds as Naomi Carter and Marcus Reed sped away from the jail in a stolen state trooper's cruiser. The engine roared, a wide, guttural snarl that drowned out the fading wail of sirens behind them, the dashboard lights casting a faint green glow across Naomi's dirt-streaked face. Her navy suit hung in tatters, her wrists still raw from the cuffs, but her grip on the wheel was steady, her eyes sharp as she pushed the speedometer past 80 miles an hour. Marcus sat beside her, his charcoal suit ripped at the shoulder, blood trickling from a cut above his eyebrow where Trooper Jack Vance had slammed him into the pavement. Her carry-on lay in the back seat, the planted drugs still inside, a ticking bomb they couldn't ditch yet. Naomi's phone, yanked from her bra during the chaos, buzzed in her lap, its screen cracked but alive. Marcus's lawyers texting updates. She couldn't read now. They'd escaped, but the cost was high, and the road ahead was a gamble. The jail breakout had been a blur of adrenaline and desperation. Jack Vance, a hulking ex-con turned trooper with a scar slashing his cheek, had pinned them in the parking lot, his gun drawn, his voice a growl as he waved the baggie of white powder. "Drug bust," he'd sneered, his badge glinting like a taunt, his eyes fixed on Naomi with a hatred that went beyond Tom Brooks's orders. Marcus had lunged, tackling Jack as the lawyers shouted, and Naomi had bolted for the cruiser, wrenching. The door opened as Jack's fist cracked Marcus's skull. She'd floored it toward him, the bumper grazing Jack's knee, and Marcus had scrambled in, panting. "Go! Go!" Jack fired, a bullet pinging off the hood, but they'd peeled out, leaving him sprawled in the dust, his curses swallowed by the night. Now, the highway was their lifeline, a thin thread stretching toward freedom, but Naomi knew it wouldn't last. She glanced at Marcus, his chest heaving as he pressed a torn sleeve to his cut, his dark eyes scanning the road behind them. "He's not letting this go," he said, his voice rough, a mix of pain and resolve. "Jack's got a grudge. Hates me for firing his brother from the airline last year." Naomi's jaw tightened, her foot pressing harder on the gas, the needle nudging 90. "He's a racist thug, Marcus. That's why he's after me. The drugs are just his excuse." The truth hung heavy between them. Jack's hatred wasn't just personal, it was systemic. A venom aimed at her skin, her defiance, her very existence. She swerved around a pothole, the cruiser shuddering, and checked the rearview mirror, empty for now. But her gut screamed trouble was closing in. Headlights flared behind them, a sudden burst of white that made her heart lurch. A trooper's cruiser screamed into view, its siren piercing the dawn. Jack Vance at the wheel, his scarred face twisted with rage through the windshield. "Hold on!" Naomi snapped, yanking the wheel left, the tires squealing as she veered onto a dirt-side road, dust billowing in their wake. Marcus braced himself, his hand slamming the dashboard, the cut on his brow oozing fresh blood. Jack followed, his cruiser fishtailing but gaining, the gap shrinking fast. Naomi floored it, the stolen car bouncing over ruts, gravel pinging off, the undercarriage like gunfire. She spotted Jack's gun arm jutting out his window, a flash of metal catching the rising sun, and ducked as a shot cracked through the air, shattering the rear windshield. Glass sprayed the back seat, shards glinting on her bag, and Marcus cursed, twisting to look back. "He's insane," he growled. But Naomi's focus was razor sharp, her mind racing for an edge. She jerked the wheel again, cutting through a field. Tall grass whipping the cruiser's sides, the terrain a minefield of bumps and dips. Jack's shots kept coming, wild now, one grazing the side mirror, another thudding into the trunk. Naomi's eyes darted to the dash, spotting the trooper's gear, a flashlight, a radio, and there, the dash cam, its red light blinking. She lunged for it, one hand on the wheel and ripped it free, tossing it to Marcus. "Get the footage," she said, her voice tight. "He's on tape, shooting at us." Marcus fumbled with it, his bloody fingers slipping, but he yanked the memory card out, shoving it into his pocket as the cruiser jolted over a ditch. Jack's headlights loomed closer, his bumper kissing theirs, a jolt that sent Naomi's teeth rattling. She swerved, clipping his front end, and he spun out, his cruiser skidding into the grass, but he corrected fast, roaring back into pursuit. The field narrowed into a wooded stretch, trees looming like sentinels, their branches clawing at the cruiser's roof. Naomi weaved through them, her breath ragged, the speedometer dropping to 50 as the terrain fought her. Jack's siren wailed, a banshee scream that echoed through the woods, and Marcus gripped her arm, his voice urgent. "He's calling backup, we can't outrun this." Naomi's eyes flicked to the rear view, Jack's grin visible now, a predator closing on prey. She slammed the brakes, the cruiser skidding to a stop, dust choking the air, and twisted to face Marcus. "Then we fight," she said, her voice a blade, and kicked the door open, rolling out as Jack's cruiser barreled toward them. He braked hard, 10 feet away, his gun already up, but Naomi was faster, darting behind a tree, Marcus scrambling after her. Jack stepped out, his boots crunching leaves, his gun steady as he advanced. "No running now," he bellowed, his scar twisting with his sneer. "You're mine, lawyer bitch." The slur hit Naomi like a slap, raw and unfiltered, a racist dog whistle that fueled her fire. She lunged, grabbing a fallen branch, and swung it at his knees as he rounded the tree, catching him off guard. He stumbled, his shot going wide, splintering. Bark and Marcus tackled him, fists flying, blood spraying from Jack's nose. Naomi ripped the gun from his hand, tossing it into the brush, and kicked his ribs, her heel sinking into soft flesh. Jack roared, thrashing, but Marcus pinned him, panting. "Stay down, you bastard." Naomi grabbed the dashcam card from Marcus's pocket, her hands shaking but sure they had him. His violence, his hate, all on film. She thought they'd won. Jack sprawled in the dirt, groaning. His cruiser stalled, the woods silent but for their ragged breaths. "We've got enough," she said, her voice hoarse, stepping back as Marcus stood, wiping blood from his face. They turned to the stolen cruiser, its engine still ticking, ready to bolt. But then static crackled, Jack's radio spitting to life on his belt, his voice rasping as he grabbed it, blood dripping from his chin. "Militia, it's Vance. Get that black lawyer. She's here armed. Dangerous." Naomi froze, her victory souring as tires rumbled in the distance. A convoy of trucks roaring toward them, headlights piercing the trees. Marcus grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the cruiser, but Jack laughed, a wet, guttural sound. "You're dead now," he spat, rolling to his knees. The militia burst into view, 3 battered pickups packed with armed men, their faces shadowed but their intent clear. Naomi dove into the driver's seat, Marcus slamming the passenger door as she gunned the engine, the cruiser lurching forward. Bullets pinged off the frame, a tire blowing out with a deafening pop. But she kept going, swerving through the woods, branches snapping against the windshield. The trucks followed, their horns blaring, a hunting pack unleashed by Jack's call. Naomi's hands trembled, the dashcam card clutched in Marcus's fist, their only proof as the chase turned deadly. She'd outsmarted Jack, but this was bigger, uglier, a racist posse gunning for her blood. And the highway was no sanctuary now. The Kansas forest loomed dense and unforgiving, its towering pines clawing at the noon sky as Naomi Carter floored the stolen cruiser, its blown tire thumping a desperate rhythm against the dirt. Branches snapped against the cracked windshield, the glass spiderwebbing with every hit, while Marcus Reed braced himself in the passenger seat, his bloody hand clutching the dashcam card, their lifeline now smeared with sweat and grime. The militia trucks roared behind them, 3 battered pickups packed with men, their engines growling like beasts on the hunt. Bullets zipped through the air, one punching a hole in the tailgate, another splintering a side mirror into jagged shards. Naomi's navy suit was a ruin, soaked with sweat and streaked with mud, her wrists throbbing where the cuffs had scarred her. She swerved hard, the cruiser fishtailing, and the wheel slipped in her grip, slick with panic. "We can't keep this up," Marcus shouted, his voice raw over the chaos, his cut brow dripping red onto his torn charcoal suit. She gritted her teeth, eyes locked on the narrowing path, knowing he was right, but refusing to stop. The chase had barely begun when the cruiser hit a root, the front axle cracking with a sickening crunch. The vehicle lurched, skidding sideways and slammed into a thick oak, the hood crumpling like foil. Steam hissed from the engine, the air thick with the stench of burnt rubber and gasoline. Naomi's head snapped forward, her forehead grazing. The wheel, a sharp sting blooming across her skull, but she shook it off, kicking the door open. "Out! Now!" she barked, tumbling into the underbrush, Marcus staggering after her, his breath ragged. The truck screeched to a halt 50 yards back, doors flying open as men spilled out, their boots pounding the earth, rifles glinting in the sunlight. A voice boomed, deep and guttural. "Spread out, find her!" Naomi grabbed Marcus's arm, pulling him deeper into the woods, leaves crunching underfoot, her lungs burning as they ran. The militia leader emerged, a wiry man in his late 30s with a shaved head and a jagged scar across his neck. Ray Brooks, Karen's cousin, his eyes wild with a hatred that matched Jack Vance's. He wore a camouflage jacket, patched and stained, and hefted a shotgun, its barrel gleaming as he fired a warning shot into the canopy, pine needles raining down. "Come out, you filthy rat!" he bellowed, his voice a roar that shook the trees, slurs spilling from his lips like venom, each one a dagger aimed at Naomi's core. His men fanned out, 6 of them, grizzled and armed, their faces twisted with the same raw bigotry, chanting taunts that echoed through the forest. "Nowhere to hide, girl." Naomi crouched behind a fallen log, Marcus beside her, his chest heaving, his hand slipping the dashcam card into her pocket. "They're animals," he whispered, his voice trembling with rage, but she nodded, her jaw tight, her mind racing for a way to turn their hate into her weapon. She peeked over the log, spotting Ray 30 feet away, his shotgun sweeping the brush, his men closing in from the flanks. The air thrummed with tension, the forest alive with their shouts and the snap of twigs. Naomi pulled her phone from her, brah, its battery at 5%, and opened the live stream app, her fingers trembling but sure. She angled it toward Ray, capturing his snarling face as he spat another slur. "We'll string you up, just like the old days." The footage streamed live, the signal weak but holding, her followers surging as the video hit the web. thousands watching in real time. Marcus whispered, "Smart, but dangerous," and she nodded, knowing it could backfire, but it was her only shot to expose them. Ray's voice carried, oblivious to the lens. "That rich bastard husband of yours can't save you now." The chat exploded online, outrage flooding in, but Naomi's focus stayed sharp. She needed more than views. She needed escape. Ray's men tightened the net, their rifles clicking as they loaded fresh rounds, their boots crunching closer. A shot rang out, splintering the log inches from Naomi's head, wood chips stinging her cheek. She ducked, her breath hitching, and Marcus yanked her back, his arm around her waist. "We've got to move," he hissed, and they bolted, weaving through the trees, the live stream jostling in her grip. The militia roared, their pursuit relentless, a pack of wolves driven by Ray's fury. Naomi's legs burned, her heels long, gone, her bare feet tearing on roots and rocks, but she pushed on, the phone her shield and sword. They reached a clearing, a muddy patch ringed by pines, and she stumbled, catching herself on a trunk, Marcus panting beside her. The trucks rumbled, closer, headlights flashing through the foliage, and Ray's voice boomed, "Burn it!" A Molotov cocktail arced through the air, shattering against the wrecked cruiser, flames erupting with a whoosh that lit the forest in orange and black. The heat licked at Naomi's skin, even from 100 feet away, the stench of gasoline, choking her lungs. Ray laughed, a manic sound, as his men cheered, the fire spreading to the grass, smoke curling into the sky. "That's your ride. Gone," he shouted, his shotgun raised, his scar twisting with his grin. Naomi's stomach sank. Their escape torched, but she kept the live stream rolling, the world watching as Ray's madness unfolded. She whispered to Marcus, "Split up, I'll draw them." And he shook his head, his eyes fierce. "No way, we stay together." But she shoved him toward the trees, hissing, "Go, distract them, I've got this." And he relented, disappearing into the shadows as she sprinted the opposite way, the phone still filming. Ray spotted her, his shotgun swinging up, and fired, the blast shredding leaves a foot from her shoulder. She dove behind a boulder, her heart hammering, the live stream shaking but live, her voice a ragged whisper into the mic. "This is what they do. This is who they are." His men closed in, their shouts a cacophony of hate, but she slipped through a gap in the pines, her bare feet silent on the moss. Ray roared, "She's mine!" and charged after her, his boots pounding, his breath a snarl in the air. Naomi thought she'd lost them, her lungs screaming as she broke into another clearing, the fire's glow fading behind her. She leaned against a tree, catching her breath, the live stream steady, her victory flickering. They'd see Ray's face, his words, his fire, and he'd pay. But then a rifle barrel pressed into her back, cold and hard, and Karen Brooks stepped, out from the shadows, her uniform swapped for jeans and a jacket, her blonde hair wild, her eyes blazing with a fury that outstripped Ray's. "Thought you'd ruin me?" She spat, jabbing the gun deeper, her finger twitching on the trigger. Naomi froze, the phone slipping in her grip, the live stream catching Karen's face as she sneered, "Drop it, or I blow you apart." Naomi let it fall, the screen hitting the dirt, still filming, her heart sinking as Karen kicked it aside, oblivious to its glow. The forest trembled with distant barks, Ray's dogs picking up her scent, their howls slicing through the silence. Karen laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "You're dead now, lawyer," and raised the rifle, her finger tightening as the dogs closed in, their snarls a death knell in the trees. The Kansas forest pulsed with late afternoon heat, the air thick with the musk of pine and the acrid bite of smoke as Naomi Carter sprinted toward the river, her bare feet tearing on jagged stones, her navy suit a shredded ghost clinging to her. Frame! Karen Brooks loomed behind her, rifle barrel pressed into Naomi's spine, the metal cold and bruising through the thin fabric, her finger twitching on the trigger. Dogs howled in the distance, Ray Brooks's hounds, their snarls slicing through the trees, closing fast with a hunger that matched their master's hate. Naomi's chest heaved, her lungs raw, her mind a storm of survival and defiance. The live stream phone lost in the dirt 50 yards back, still glowing, still filming for the world to see. Karen's voice rasped, a venomous growl. "Move, or I end you right here." and Naomi stumbled forward, her eyes locking on the river ahead, its muddy waters churning under a bruised sky. A lifeline or a grave, she couldn't tell yet. The riverbank rose sharp and steep, its edge crumbling under her weight as she reached it, the current roaring 30 feet below, swollen from spring rains, whitecaps crashing against rocks. Karen shoved her, the rifle jabbing deeper, and Naomi's toes curled into the soil, her body teetering on the brink. "Jump!" Karen snapped, her blonde hair whipping in the wind, her eyes wild with a fury that had festered since the plane. "Or I'll shoot you and dump you myself." Naomi twisted, catching Karen's gaze, her voice steady despite the tremble in her legs. "You're finished, Karen. The world saw you, saw Ray. It's over." Karen laughed, a shrill, unhinged sound, and swung the rifle butt, cracking it against Naomi's shoulder. Pain flared, white-hot, and Naomi staggered, her arm numb. But she didn't fall, not yet. The dog's barks grew louder, a chorus of death closing in, and she knew she had seconds, maybe less. She lunged, not back, but forward, diving off the bank into the river, the air rushing past her as she plummeted. Karen's scream chased her, "You bitch!" followed by a gunshot, the bullet slicing the water inches from Naomi's head as she hit the surface, the cold slamming her like a fist. The current seized her, dragging her under, her lungs burning as she kicked, clawing for air. She broke through, gasping, the river a chaos of foam and force, pulling her downstream. Karen fired again, rounds peppering the water, one grazing, Naomi's calf a sharp sting that bled red into the murk. She swam, her arms slicing through the torrent, aiming for a rocky outcrop jutting from the far bank, its edges slick with moss but solid, a haven if she could reach it. The dogs hit the bank above, their jaws snapping, Ray's voice booming. "She's in the water, get her!" Naomi hauled herself onto the rocks, her fingers slipping, her body shaking as she flattened against the stone. The river's roar drowning, the chaos above. She peeked up, spotting Ray and Karen on the bank, their silhouettes framed against the sinking sun, Ray's shotgun raised, Karen's rifle swinging wild. "She's done!" Karen shouted, her voice cracking with triumph, and Ray nodded, lowering his weapon, his scar twisting as he grinned. "Let the river take her, saves us the trouble." Naomi slowed her breathing, her mind racing. They thought she'd drowned, their celebration a crack in their armor she could exploit. She waited, her calf bleeding, her shoulder throbbing, until their voices faded, the dogs' howls retreating, as they turned back into the trees. She slid off the outcrop, wading chest-deep to a shallow bend, her body screaming but her will iron. The livestream phone was gone, but its footage lived online, millions watching by now, her proof spreading like wildfire. She crouched in the reeds, tearing a strip from her suit to bind her calf, the blood soaking through fast, her hands steady despite the pain. Ray and Karen thought they'd won, their smugness a rope she'd used to hang them. She stood, limping, toward a cluster of boulders, her eyes scanning for Marcus, praying he'd made it through the woods. A rustle snapped her head up, and Ray emerged, alone, his shotgun dangling, his face slack with shock as he saw her alive. "You're a ghost," he muttered, raising the gun, but Naomi charged, her adrenaline a wildfire, slamming a rock into his temple before he could fire. He crumpled, the shotgun clattering to the stones, his body limp as blood trickled from his head, unconscious but breathing. Naomi staggered back, her chest heaving, her hands slick with his blood and her own, the rock tumbling from her grip. She'd turned the tables, Ray down, Karen blind to his fall, the dogs scattered without his command. She sank to her knees, the river lapping at her feet, her mind tasting a fleeting victory. She'd survived, outsmarted them. Her live stream, a beacon burning their world down. But then Karen's voice cut through the silence, shrill and panicked from the bank. "Ray, where are you? Tom's coming, hurry up." Naomi's head snapped up, her relief souring as boots thundered closer, Tom Brooks's backup roaring in, with a vengeance she hadn't foreseen. A helicopter buzzed overhead, its blades slicing the air, a black speck against the dusk that grew into a roaring beast, its spotlight sweeping the river. Naomi dove behind the boulders, her heart pounding, the light missing her by inches as it locked on Ray's sprawled form. The chopper hovered, a rope ladder dropping, and tear gas canisters clattered down, bursting with a hiss that choked the air. Naomi's eyes stung, her throat seizing as she coughed, the gas curling around her like a living thing, blinding her, burning her lungs. She crawled, her hands clawing mud, her vision blurring, the river's edge her only guide. Karen screamed from above, "She's there! Gas her out!" And the chopper dipped lower, more canisters raining down, the world dissolving into a haze of pain and panic. Naomi's fingers found the water, her body sliding back into the shallows, the cold shocking her senses awake as she held her breath, submerging to escape the gas. She surfaced downstream, gasping, her eyes streaming. Her calf wound a throbbing agony, but she was alive, hidden in the reeds as the chopper circled, its light slashing the night. Ray lay still, Karen's silhouette frantic on the bank, Tom's voice barking through a megaphone. "Find her, dead or alive!" The gas drifted, a toxic fog that cloaked her retreat, her mind a whirl of rage and resolve. She'd knocked Ray out, thought she'd won. But this was a war machine, a family of monsters who'd never stop, and she was cornered, wounded, alone. Hey viewers, what's your take? Comment number 1 if you're cheering Naomi's badass rock move on. Ray number 2 if you're pissed Karen's still gunning for her. Drop a like if you're rooting for her to dodge this chopper nightmare. And subscribe to see if she turns this gas trap into her next strike. This river's running red with fight, so don't miss what's coming. Now, with Naomi choking in, the Reeds and Tom's helicopter raining hell. Can she outrun this family's wrath, or will their next blow finally break her? Will Marcus find her in this chaos, or is she facing the governor's game alone? Buckle up, because this reckoning's about to drown in something bigger. The muddy clearing beside the Kansas River shimmered with dusk's fading light, the air thick with tear gas and the stench of wet earth as Naomi Carter staggered free of the reeds, her lungs raw, her eyes streaming from the chemical burn. Her navy suit hung in tatters, soaked and heavy, her calf wound pulsing with every step, blood seeping through the makeshift bandage. The helicopter's roar faded as it circled back toward Ray Brooks's unconscious form, its spotlight slashing the trees, missing her by a hair as she crouched behind a gnarled stump. Her breath came in shallow gasps, the gas lingering in her throat. But her mind stayed sharp, honed by years of fighting battles no one thought she'd win. She'd taken Ray down, thought she'd outsmarted them. But Karen's scream for Tom and that chopper had flipped her victory into a choking nightmare. Now the forest trembled with new boots, heavier, more deliberate. And Naomi knew this wasn't just the sheriff anymore, this was something bigger, something worse. The helicopter landed, its blade slowing to a whine, kicking up mud and leaves as a figure stepped out. Tall and broad, his suit crisp despite the chaos, his silver hair glinting under the spotlight. Governor Hank Grayson, a man whose name carried weight in Kansas and beyond, strode into the clearing, his polished shoes sinking into the muck, his face a mask of cold authority. He was in his 60s, lean and sharp, a tycoon-turned politician with a reputation for crushing enemies, especially Marcus Reed, whose airline had defied his regulatory chokeholds. His eyes swept the scene, landing on Ray's sprawled body, then flicking to Karen Brooks, who rushed to his side, her rifle dangling, her voice shrill. "She's out there, Governor. She attacked Ray. She's a terrorist." Hank's lips twitched, a faint smirk, and he raised a hand, silencing her as deputies fanned out, their radios crackling with orders. Naomi's stomach twisted, her pulse spiking. This wasn't random. Hank was here for her, and he'd brought a machine she couldn't outrun alone. He barked into a megaphone, his voice booming over the river's rush. "Naomi Carter, you're under arrest for terrorism, assault, and endangering public safety. Surrender, or we'll hunt you down." The words hit her like a slap. Terrorism. A lie so bold it could only come from power like his. A racist frame-up to bury her and Marcus in one swing. She pressed deeper into the stump's shadow, her hands trembling, her calf throbbing as blood pooled in the mud. Hank turned to a deputy, his tone clipped. "Set up the press. I want this live. Show the state she's a threat." A van rolled, in news crews spilling out, cameras flashing as Hank posed beside Ray, his face grave for the lenses, spinning a tale of a dangerous fugitive who'd attacked a citizen. Naomi's fists clenched, her nails digging into her palms. He was staging a spectacle, painting her as a monster to justify the gas, the guns, the hunt. The deputies combed the trees, their boots squelching, their flashlights slicing the dusk. But Naomi stayed low, her mind racing for an out. Hank's voice carried smooth now for the cameras. This woman's actions disrupted a flight, assaulted crew, and now this will bring her to justice. Karen nodded beside him, her eyes darting, her rifle traded for a victim's tremble, playing her part in his theater. Naomi's gut burned. Her live stream was out there. Millions had seen Ray's hate, Karen's threats. But Hank's power could twist it, bury it, make her the villain. She shifted, peering through the stump's roots, spotting a deputy 20 feet away, his back to her, his radio buzzing with Hank's orders. She could bolt, steal his gear, but the gas had weakened her, her leg a dead weight dragging her down. Then engines growled, a convoy of black SUVs tearing into the clearing, their doors slamming as federal agents poured out, badges flashing, guns drawn. Marcus Reed led them, his charcoal suit bloodied and torn, his face a storm of fury and relief, as he spotted Naomi's hiding place. "Hank Grayson, stand down!" he roared, striding forward, a Fed at his side barking, "FBI, you're under investigation for abuse of power." Hank's smirk vanished, his eyes narrowing as he faced Marcus, the cameras swiveling to catch the clash. "You've got no jurisdiction here, Reed," Hank snapped, but the Fed stepped up holding a tablet. "We've got warrants, Governor. Your calls with Tom Brooks, your orders to frame her. It's all recorded." Naomi's heart leapt. Marcus had moved fast, turned her live stream into a weapon, and now Hank was cornered. The deputies froze, their flashlights dipping as the Feds advanced, cuffing Hank with a metallic clack, his face twisting with rage. "This is a setup!" he shouted, his silver hair falling into his eyes. But the cameras rolled, capturing his downfall. The press buzzing as Marcus pushed through, kneeling beside Naomi. "You're safe," he whispered, his hands cupping. Her muddy face, her tears mixing with the dirt as she nodded, her voice hoarse. "You got him." The Feds hauled Hank to an SUV, Karen shrinking back, her rifle gone, her bravado crumbling as Ray groaned awake, deputies pulling him up. Naomi leaned into Marcus, her body shaking, relief flooding her. She'd survived the gas, the hunt, and now Hank's empire was cracking, her name cleared by the Feds' raid. But then Karen lunged, a flash of steel in her hand, a knife she'd hidden in her jacket, her scream a banshee wail as she drove it into Naomi's side. "You don't win," she shrieked, the blade sinking deep, hot pain exploding through Naomi's ribs as she gasped, collapsing into Marcus's arms. Blood soaked her suit, dark and fast, and Marcus roared, tackling Karen, pinning her as Feds swarmed, wrenching the knife free, her wrists cuffed in seconds. Naomi's vision blurred, the clearing spinning, her breath shallow as Marcus pressed, his hands to the wound, his voice breaking, "Stay with me, Naomi, please." The Feds radioed for medics, their shouts a distant echo. But the pain was a tidal wave, pulling her under, her triumph poisoned by Karen's last vicious strike. She clung to consciousness, her eyes locked on Marcus, his face a lifeline in the haze, blood pooling beneath her, warm and sticky in the mud. The Feds dragged Karen away, her screams fading, Hank's SUV peeling out as the press scrambled, their flashes blinding. Naomi's hand gripped Marcus's, weak but fierce, her voice a whisper. "Get them all." And he nodded, tears streaking his cheeks, his resolve iron as medics rushed in, their gear clattering. The knife wound pulsed, a deep, festering agony, and she knew it was bad. Worse than the calf graze, worse than anything she'd faced yet. The clearing dissolved into shadows, her body slumping, the fight draining from her limbs as the medics worked, their hands a blur, her survival hanging by a thread in the dusk's dying light. The rural Kansas hospital reeked of antiseptic and fear, its fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as Naomi Carter was rushed through the double doors on a gurney, her blood-soaked navy suit clinging to her like a shroud. The knife wound in her, side pulsed with every jolt, a deep searing agony that blurred her vision. Her breath shallow gasps as medics swarmed, their gloved hands pressing gauze to the gash, red seeping through fast. Marcus Reed ran beside her, his charcoal suit torn and bloody, his face a mask of panic and fury. his hand gripping hers, slick with her blood, his voice a ragged plea. "Hang on, Naomi. You're strong. You've got this." The hallway stretched, endlessly. White walls streaked with grime, the squeak of wheels and shouts of "Or! Now!" echoing as they barreled toward surgery. Her calf wound, throbbed, a dull ache beneath the knife's sharper bite, but she clung to consciousness, her eyes locked on Marcus, her lifeline in the chaos. The medics moved with brutal efficiency, cutting away her suit, the fabric peeling off in wet strips as they hooked her to monitors, beeps piercing the air, erratic and urgent. A doctor, a wiry man with graying hair, barked orders. "Stab wound, right flank. She's losing blood. Get her under." Naomi's head lolled, the ceiling tiles spinning, her mind flashing to Karen Brooks's wild scream, the knife sinking in, a final vicious twist to her fleeting victory. Marcus loomed over her, his hands trembling as he brushed her forehead, his voice breaking. "I'm here, I've got the feds, Hank's done, just stay with me." An IV pierced her arm, cold fluid rushing in, and the world faded, her eyes fluttering shut as the anesthesia pulled her under. The last sound, Marcus's desperate, "I love you," fading into black. She woke to a dim room, the beep of a heart, monitor steady now, a faint lifeline in the stillness. Pain gnawed at her side, dulled by drugs but present, a constant throb beneath the bandages wrapping her ribs. Her leg was bound too, the calf wound stitched, her body a map of scars from a war she hadn't started. Marcus sat beside her, his suit jacket gone, his shirt stained with her blood, his eyes red-rimmed but fierce as he leaned forward. Relief flooding his face. "You made it," he whispered, his hand finding hers, warm and firm, her fingers weak but curling into his. She nodded, her throat dry, her voice a croak. "Hank?" Marcus's jaw tightened, a faint smile breaking through. "Arrested, confessed on tape, feds have him cold, your live stream sealed it." Naomi exhaled, a weight lifting. Her name cleared, the governor's lies shattered. A victory she could taste through the haze. The room was small, its walls peeling. A single window showing a night sky pierced by stars. A nurse slipped in, her scrubs faded, her movements brisk as she checked Naomi's chart, muttering, "Stable, good," before vanishing. Marcus pulled his chair closer, his voice low. "Karen's in custody. Ray's awake but locked up. Tom's scrambling. We've got them." Naomi's lips curved, a faint triumph, her body broken but her spirit clawing back. "The dash cam card?" she asked, her eyes sharpening, and Marcus patted his pocket. "Safe. It's all there. Jack's shots, everything." She relaxed, her head sinking into the pillow, relief washing over her. They'd won. The evidence stacked, the world watching as her enemies fell. But the peace shattered with a crash, the hospital doors slamming open, boots thundering down the hall. Tom Brooks burst in, his sheriff's badge glinting, his face a storm of rage. 3 deputies at his heels, their guns drawn, their eyes cold. "She's not clear yet," Tom snarled, his voice a gravelly boom. "She killed Ray. I've got witnesses. She's under arrest." Marcus shot to his feet, his fists clenched, roaring, "That's a lie. Ray's alive. You've got nothing." Naomi's heart lurched, her monitors spiking as she pushed up, pain ripping through her side, her voice weak but fierce. "You're desperate, Tom. It's over." Tom's grin was cruel, his hand slamming the bed rail. "Not in my county. Sweetheart, Ray's dead and you did it, end of story." The deputies advanced, one yanking Marcus back, his arm twisting as he fought, shouting, "She's barely alive, you bastard." The other 2 loomed over Naomi, their badges glinting, their faces blank but their intent clear. "Hands up," one barked, his gun inches from her chest, and she raised them, trembling, the IV tugging at her arm, blood oozing through her bandage. Tom leaned close, his breath sour. "You thought you'd win, huh? I run this, not your feds." Marcus broke free, shoving a deputy, but the 3rd cracked a baton across his ribs, dropping him to his knees with a grunt. Naomi's eyes blazed, her mind racing. Ray wasn't dead. She'd seen him breathe. This was another frame-up, a racist lie to bury her alive. Tom barked orders. "Lock it down. No calls, no visitors, and the deputies moved, unplugging the phone, yanking cords from the wall, the room plunging into a dim hum as the power cut, the monitors flatlining with a whine. Darkness swallowed the ward, emergency lights flickering red, casting Tom's face in a demonic glow. Marcus lunged again, tackling a deputy, his fists flying, blood spraying as he roared. "You won't take her!" Naomi pushed off the bed, her legs buckling, pain a white-hot scream through her body. But she grabbed the IV stand, swinging it at the nearest deputy, the metal clanging off his shoulder. He stumbled, cursing, and she fell back, her wound tearing, blood soaking the sheets, her strength fading fast. Tom seized her arm, wrenching her up, his grip bruising as he dragged her toward the door, her bare feet slipping on the tiles, her hospital gown flapping. "You're mine now," he growled, his deputies pinning Marcus to the floor, his shouts muffled as they pummeled him, his blood pooling under their boots. Naomi's vision swam, her side a furnace of pain, but she twisted, her elbow cracking Tom's jaw, a weak blow that made him snarl, "You'll pay for that." The hallway loomed, dark and empty. The staff gone. The hospital a tomb under his command. He shoved her forward, her body slamming a wall, her breath a sob as she slid down, her hands clawing for anything to fight back. Then a shadow moved. A nurse, not the one from before, her scrubs too clean, her steps too quiet as she slipped behind Tom, a syringe glinting in her hand. Naomi's eyes widened, recognition hitting through the fog. Karen Brooks, free, disguised, her blonde hair tucked under a cap, her grin feral as she plunged the needle into Naomi's IV line, whispering, "Night-night, lawyer." Poison burned. Through the tube, a cold fire racing up Naomi's arm, her heart stuttering, her limbs going numb as she slumped, her voice a choked, "No," before darkness swallowed her again. Tom laughed, stepping back, his deputies dragging Marcus as Karen vanished into the shadows, the hospital a trap snapping shut, Naomi's victory poisoned in her veins. The hospital basement was a cavern of shadows and damp concrete, its air thick with the tang of rust and bleach as Naomi Carter staggered down a flickering corridor, her body a wreck of pain and poison. Karen Brooks's syringe had burned through, her veins, a cold venom that numbed her legs and fogged her mind, but she'd clawed free of the hospital bed, ripping the IV from her arm as Tom Brooks and his deputies dragged Marcus away. Her gown hung loose, blood-soaked from the reopened knife wound in her side, her calf a throbbing mess. But her will was a steel thread pulling her forward. The basement stairs had been a blur, her bare feet slipping on cold metal, her hands gripping the rail as she stumbled into this maze of storage rooms and flickering bulbs. She heard Marcus's muffled shouts above, fists against flesh, and Tom's guttural laugh, a sound that fueled her fire as she limped toward a rusted door, her breath shallow, her vision swimming. The corridor stretched endlessly, pipes dripping. Overhead, puddles pooling on the cracked floor, reflecting the red glow of an exit sign 50 feet away. Naomi's fingers brushed the wall, steadying her as the poison pulsed, her heart stuttering, her limbs heavy like wet sand. She'd lost her phone, her dashcam card, everything. But she remembered the live stream. Millions had seen Ray's hate, Karen's threats. It was out there, a weapon if she could survive to wield it. A crash echoed behind her, boots pounding. The stairs, and Tom's voice boomed. "She's down here, find her!" Her pulse spiked, her head snapping back, shadows moving as deputies spilled into the basement, their flashlights slashing the dark. She ducked into a storage room, its door ajar, shelves packed with dusty boxes and medical supplies. A trap or a chance, she couldn't tell yet. She crouched behind a crate, her breath ragged, her side leaking blood onto the floor, a dark pool that glistened in the dimness. The room was a tomb, its air stale, a single bulb swaying overhead, casting jagged shadows across the walls. Footsteps thundered closer, Tom's growl cutting through. "Check every corner, she's weak, she won't get far." Naomi's eyes darted, spotting a broom leaning against the wall, its handle splintered, but solid. She grabbed it, her hands, trembling, and snapped it over her knee, the crack loud in the silence giving her a jagged spear. She gripped it, her knuckles white, her body screaming, but her mind was a blade, sharp and ready as the deputy's boots stopped outside the door. The door creaked open, and Tom stormed in, his khaki uniform sweat-stained, his badge glinting, Karen at his side, her nurse disguise shed for jeans and a jacket, a scalpel glinting in her hand. 2 deputies flanked them, their guns drawn, their faces hard with the same hate that had hunted her from the plane. "End of the line," Tom sneered, his eyes locking on her hiding spot, his gun swinging up as he advanced. Naomi surged, her spear slashing the air, catching the nearest deputy's arm, blood spraying as he yelped, his gun clattering to the floor. She dove, rolling behind a shelf, the move tearing her wound wider, pain a white-hot scream through her ribs. But she grabbed the gun, her hands slick with blood and sweat, firing blind at Tom's legs. He roared, stumbling, a bullet grazing his thigh, and Karen lunged, her scalpel slashing Naomi's shoulder, a shallow cut that burned like fire. Naomi twisted, slamming the gun's butt into Karen's jaw, a crack echoing as she staggered back, spitting blood, her scalpel skittering across the concrete. Tom recovered, his gun booming, the shot splintering the shelf above Naomi's head, wood raining down as she scrambled, her legs buckling, the poison dragging her down. She fired again, hitting the second deputy's knee, dropping him with a scream, and kicked a box at Tom, its contents spilling, bandages and vials crashing around his feet. He slipped, cursing, and Naomi bolted, her body a wreck but her will iron, dragging the broom spear as she locked the door behind her, trapping them in the storage room, their shouts muffled, their fists pounding the metal. She stumbled to a rusty desk, her breath a sob, and found an old security camera, its lens cracked but blinking, wired to a monitor flickering with static. Her fingers fumbled, switching it on, the screen flaring to life, showing Tom and Karen, raging inside, Ray alive on a stretcher upstairs, proof of Tom's lie. She pulled her cracked phone from her bra, forgotten in the chaos, its battery at 1%, and started a live stream, angling it to catch the monitor. Her voice a rasp. "This is Naomi Carter. Tom Brooks framed me. Ray's alive. There. Lying, see for yourselves." The feed went live, her followers surging, the world watching as Tom's voice bellowed through the door. "You're dead, you hear me?" Karen's face twisted, foam bubbling at her lips, her own poison stash, backfiring as she collapsed, convulsing, her scalpel clattering beside her. The door buckled, Tom's shoulder slamming it, dents forming as Naomi slumped against the wall, her gun empty, her spear lost, her body fading. Feds burst in from the stairs, their vests glinting, guns drawn, Marcus at their head, his face bruised, his eyes wild as he shouted, "Naomi!" They breached the storage room, cuffing Tom as he roared, dragging Karen's limp form, her breath a gurgle, poison claiming her in a twisted irony. Marcus reached Naomi, dropping to his knees, his arms around her, his voice breaking, "You did it, you got them." She nodded, her head lolling, relief flooding her as the Fed secured the scene, the live stream catching every second, Tom's confession forced by the camera's unblinking eye. "Ray's alive, damn it!" She thought it was over. Her enemies down, the truth out, her body slumping into Marcus's hold, blood pooling beneath her, the poison's grip loosening as medics rushed in, their shouts a distant hum. But then a gunshot cracked. A deputy, hidden in the shadows, his face a mask of rage, screaming, "For the sheriff!" The bullet tore through her chest, a searing jolt that stole her breath, her eyes widening as she fell, Marcus catching her, his scream a raw, "No!" Blood bubbled at her lips, her vision tunneling, the medics diving for her, their hands a blur as they pressed her wound, her heart faltering. Tom smirked from his cuffs, the deputy tackled by feds, but the damage was done. Naomi's victory a fragile thread snapping as Marcus cradled her, sobbing, "Stay with me, please." The basement a battlefield, her life slipping through his fingers in the midnight gloom. The Los Angeles courtroom buzzed with a restless hum, its polished wood benches packed with reporters, activists, and onlookers, their whispers a tide washing over the room as Marcus Reed stood trial weeks after the Kansas hospital nightmare. The air was thick with tension, the scent of stale coffee and nervous sweat clinging to the walls, sunlight streaming through high windows to glint off the judge's gavel, poised above a desk that loomed like a throne. Marcus sat at the defense table, his charcoal suit pristine again, but his face was haggard, shadows bruising his eyes. His broad shoulders slumped under the weight of a charge that twisted his wife's fight into a noose around his neck. Inciting violence via live stream, the prosecution claimed, pinning Naomi's broadcasts on him. A final racist jab from the deputy's allies. A network of hate that refused to die even with Tom Brooks, Karen Brooks, and Governor Hank Grayson behind bars. Naomi was presumed dead, her chest wound from the deputy's bullet, a fatal blow in the basement. Or so the world thought. And Marcus bore the grief alone, his lawyers flanking him, their briefcases stacked with evidence that felt hollow without her. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled tight, banged her gavel, silencing the room, her voice a gravelly command. Order, will proceed. The prosecutor, a slick man in a pinstripe suit, rose, his smirk sharp as he faced the jury, 12 faces ranging from bored to grim, their eyes flicking to Marcus with a mix of pity and suspicion. Marcus Reed turned his wife's reckless actions into a public spectacle, he began, his tone oily, inciting chaos, endangering lives, all for his own gain. This is not justice, it's vigilantism. He waved a tablet, replaying Naomi's live streams, Ray's slurs, Karen's threats, Tom's confession, but spinning them as Marcus's orchestration, a CEO pulling strings to dodge accountability. Marcus's jaw clenched, his fists balling under the table, his lawyers scribbling notes, their whispers urgent. But he stayed silent, his mind on Naomi, her blood on his hands, her last words, "Get them all," echoing in his skull. The courtroom doors creaked, a faint sound lost in the prosecutor's drone. But heads turned as a figure limped in, her steps slow, deliberate, her navy suit replaced by a simple black dress, its hem brushing bandaged knees. Naomi Carter stood, there, alive, her face pale but fierce, her side stitched, her chest wound a miracle of surgery and grit, her hair pulled back to reveal eyes that burned with a fire the deputy's bullet couldn't snuff out. Gasps rippled through the room, Marcus's head snapping up, his breath catching, tears spilling as he choked. Naomi. The judge's gavel froze midair, the prosecutor's tablet clattering to the floor, his smirk vanishing as Naomi advanced, leaning on a cane, her voice a rasp but steady. "I'm here and I've got the truth." The gallery erupted, reporters scrambling, cameras flashing, the jury leaning forward, their boredom shattered by her presence. A ghost turned warrior, in their midst. She'd faked her death, a desperate plan hatched with Marcus in the hospital's chaos, medics sworn to secrecy as they wheeled her out, her pulse weak but holding, her body hidden in a safe house while he played the grieving husband. The live streams, the dashcam card, the hospital footage, all preserved, all damning, and now she held them up, a USB drive in her trembling hand, her eyes locking on the judge. "This clears my husband," she said, her tone cutting through the noise. "And nails the real criminals. Tom Brooks, Karen Brooks, Hank Grayson, and their deputy triggerman." The bailiff took the drive, plugging it into a screen, and the room watched in stunned silence as the basement footage rolled. Tom's lie about Ray's death, Karen's poison attempt, the deputy's shot, Marcus's sobs, every frame a hammer smashing the prosecution's case. The prosecutor sputtered, "This is inadmissible, she's a fugitive." But Naomi turned to him, her cane tapping the floor, her voice steel. "I'm a survivor, and you're done spinning lies." The judge banged her gavel, her eyes narrowing. "Play it all." And the footage unfolded, Ray alive on a stretcher, Tom's confession, Karen's collapse, the deputy's scream, "For the sheriff." The jury's faces hardened, disgust replacing doubt, and Marcus stood, crossing to Naomi, his arms around her, his whisper fierce, "You're unstoppable." She leaned into him, her body frail, but her spirit a titan, the courtroom hers now, the tide turning as the prosecutor sank into his chair, his case a ruin. The judge called a recess, her gavel a thunderclap, and the room buzzed as lawyers huddled, reporters shouting questions. But Naomi and Marcus stayed still, their hands clasped, her cane steady between them. Hours later, the trial resumed, the USB evidence ruled admissible, the prosecution's charges crumbling under its weight. The deputy, identified as Carl Dunn, a militia plant with a rap sheet buried by Tom, was arrested in a sting that morning. His confession spilling names, a network of racists tied to Hank's payroll. The jury deliberated 90 minutes, their verdict a unanimous not guilty for Marcus. His name cleared, his shoulders lifting as he hugged Naomi, her tears soaking. His shirt, relief a flood after months of hell. But Naomi wasn't done. She stepped to the podium, her voice rising over the chaos. Tom Brooks, Karen Brooks, Ray Brooks, Hank Grayson, Carl Dunn, they're jailed for life. Conspiracy, assault, attempted murder, the works. The feds have it airtight. The courtroom stilled, her words a gavel of their own, and she turned to the judge, her cane tapping. I've got hospital footage, every second of their lies, it's public now. Let it bury them. The judge nodded, her expression grim. It's entered, Mrs. Carter, justice will hold. Naomi exhaled, her body trembling, the fight draining from her as Marcus steadied her, his arm a rock she'd leaned on through the storm. The gallery cheered, activists chanting her name, reporters scrambling to rewrite headlines, her resurrection a shockwave rippling beyond the room. Then she dropped the bomb, her voice steady, her eyes blazing. I'm stepping down as Marcus's wife, not because I don't love him, but because I'm running for governor of Kansas. The room froze, Marcus's jaw dropping, a faint smile breaking through his shock, the jury gasping, the judge's gavel slipping in her hand. I'll dismantle the system that nearly killed me, Naomi continued, her cane a scepter now. The racism, the corruption, the hate, it ends with me. I've got the evidence, the will, and the people. Watch me. She turned to Marcus, her hand brushing his. You'll run the airline, I'll run the state. Together we'll fix this. He nodded, pride swelling in his chest, his voice a whisper. You're a revolution. The courtroom erupted again, cheers drowning the prosecutor's weak objections, the judge banging her gavel. Order, damn it! But her eyes glinted with respect. Naomi limped back to Marcus, her body a wreck but her spirit soaring, the deputy's bullet a scar she'd wear as a badge, her fake death a gambit that flipped victimhood into power. The feds escorted Tom, Karen, Ray, Hank, and Carl to maximum security that night, their life sentences sealed by her footage. Their empire of hate a smoldering ruin. She'd survived the plane, the jail, the militia, the gas, the knife, the poison, the shot, and now she'd rise, a governor in waiting, her name a rallying cry for justice. Outside, Los Angeles glowed under a twilight sky, the courthouse steps, swarming with supporters as Naomi and Marcus emerged, her cane tapping, his arm around her, their bond unshaken by the chaos. She looked out, the city sprawling before her, a battlefield she'd conquered and a future she'd shape. We did it, she said, her voice soft, and Marcus squeezed her hand. You did it, Naomi. You changed everything. She smiled, faint but fierce, her eyes on the horizon, the governorship a promise, the system a beast she'd slay, her fight a flame that wouldn't die. The crowd chanted, Carter, Carter, and she raised her cane, a salute to the war she'd won, and the one she'd wage, her legacy a tidal wave breaking over a world that had tried to drown her. Naomi Carter's journey in Flight Attendant orders black woman to move. 4 minutes later, she discovers who her husband is a raw testament to resilience against systemic racism and unchecked power. The first lesson is the strength of perseverance. Naomi faced relentless racial injustice, from Karen Brooks's initial bias on the plane to Tom Brooks's brutal frame-ups and Hank Grayson's political vendetta, yet she never broke, turning each attack into fuel for her fight. Her story teaches us that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the will to push through it, even when the odds stack higher with every blow. Second, it reveals the power of truth as a weapon. Naomi's live streams and recordings exposed her enemies' hate, proving that visibility can topple even the mightiest tyrants when wielded with purpose. Third, it underscores the cost of systemic prejudice. Her scars, physical and emotional, reflect a society that punishes defiance against its biases. Yet her survival shows change is possible when we refuse to stay silent. Finally, her leap from victim to governor-elect hammers home the idea that real justice isn't just survival, it's transformation, dismantling the systems that oppress from within. This tale isn't just a thrill ride, it's a mirror to our world, urging us to confront racism head-on. So, what do you think? How far would you go to fight injustice in your own life? Drop a comment below, hit that like button if Naomi's grit inspires you, subscribe to catch more tales of defiance, and share this with anyone who needs a spark of courage. Thanks for joining us on this wild journey. Here's to standing tall, against the storm, and building a future where justice isn't just a dream, but a reality for all.